The UFC is filled with iconic matchups, and while fans love one-offs, they aren't as exciting as longtime rivalries. So here are some of the biggest rivalries in the UFC of all time. And we're starting off strong with the Royce Gracie vs. Ken Shamrock feud. Because nearly 25 years after their first fight in the octagon, these two Hall of Famers still haven't resolved things. And there's a good chance they never will. In the semi-final round of UFC 1, Gracie caught Shamrock off guard, forcing him to submit to a sleeve choke. He then defeated Gerard Gordeau to win the match and the title.
There's the tap. There's the tap. Hoist that. But that didn't last long. That's it.
The American fighter might have given many excuses for why he lost, but he was determined to get revenge for his defeat. Unfortunately, he had to wait until UFC 5 to get the chance. When they eventually faced off in the first super fight, the 30-minute time limit wasn't enough for both fighters since it ended in a draw.
All right, pull it apart, pull it apart.
There's a lot of people clapping.
I said the booze would change.
21 years later, they met for the third time. But this time it was outside the octagon, with Gracie coming out on top in a first-round finish that started after he hit below the belt, which started a debate in the MMA community about whether the match was fair. So while we have an official winner, this rivalry's far from over. But Gracie wasn't the only fighter who was on Shamrock's hit list. His rivalry with Tito Ortiz was much more intense. Unfortunately for the world's most dangerous man, it was also a bit more one-sided. Since this feud started in a very petty way, after Tito won his matches against Jerry Bollander and Guy Metzer at UFC 18 and UFC 19, he taunted Shamrock after every win.
But Ken Shamrock was talking a little smack, and I know that old man's in the house. If you care for another beating, Shamrock, step up. I'll make you remind yourself that I am Rick James and you are my bitch.
But it looked like his insults were mostly ignored since it took them 4 years to make their octagon debut together. Still, Ortiz kept his light heavyweight title in the third round before registering back-to-back first-round knockout victories in the next two fights. Even if it seemed like they'd put their differences aside after their third matchup, when Ortiz performed his gravedigger celebration and wore a shirt that said punishing him into retirement. Rumor has it they still aren't on the best terms. Still, regardless of their differences, the one thing they had in common was that they both held grudges. Because Tito Ortiz's competition with Chuck Liddell was never ending. Ortiz and Liddell both started gaining popularity in the same light heavyweight division, with Ortiz holding the title and Liddell emerging as a competitive fighter who wanted to challenge for the title. Even though Tito was hesitant to go head-to-head with the Iceman after losing his title to Randy Couture, the two eventually faced off at UFC 47, with Liddell winning a second-round knockout.
Combination uppercut. Chuck Liddell wins it. Unbelievable.
2.5 years later, they met a second time at UFC 66. But even then, Liddell successfully defended the light heavyweight title by winning by stoppage once more, this time in the third round.
He's not hurting him. He's hitting his arms mostly. He's not hurting him here. But Tito has to move.
And it is all over. Chuck Liddell remains the light heavyweight champion.
We anticipated a fight at UFC 115 after serving as rival coaches on The Ultimate Fighter's 11th season. Just a few weeks before the fight, Ortiz announced that he had to pull out due to an injury. They finally came together during Oscar De La Hoya's Golden Boy promotions after years of attempting to match up the two fighters in the same ring. And we finally got to see Liddell get his long-awaited win. Thankfully, his next matchup on our list didn't drag on for so long. Because unlike his first feud, Liddell's second feud with Randy Couture was more about competition and was settled inside the ring. After losing the title to Josh Barnett and again losing to Rico Rodriguez at UFC 39, Couture joined the light heavyweight trio as the third member in the early 2000s. Of course, he had to drop to 205 pounds to compete for gold. But when Captain America finally competed, he made waves in the community. Because at UFC 43, he stopped Liddell's 10-fight winning streak and became the first fighter to finish Liddell with strikes. 3 months later, he defeated Ortiz to unify the championships. Couture and Liddell competed as rival coaches on the first season of The Ultimate Fighter, and a week later, they fought again for the title at the Cox Pavilion. With a first-round knockout victory at UFC 52, Liddell would capture the title and tie the series. 10 months later at UFC 57, he won the fight and the match. His knockout put an end to this iconic rivalry, and fans couldn't stop talking about the match for months. Another iconic matchup was that of Jon Jones and Daniel Cormier. This feud started right after the two met backstage at UFC 121 in 2010. DC didn't appreciate that a rookie like Jones was challenging him straight up, especially considering he had an Olympic wrestling background. And so they settled into the ring. After Jones pulled out of UFC 178, the two finally met at UFC 182 in 2014. The younger fighter completely dominated the veteran in the ring, but nothing compares to their banter outside the octagon. Fans have seen them fight physically and verbally multiple times over the years. The social media arguments were pure entertainment, and the two are still rivals to this day. But the rivalry has nothing on the competition between Anderson Silva and Kyle Sonnen. The gangster from West Lynn used to be a fighter with a record of 26-10-1, before he decided to pick up the mic and talk his way into the spotlight. And the majority of casual fans couldn't even name Sonnen out of a lineup. But his time in the ring was nothing short of iconic. His 3-fight winning streak put him in a position to contend for the middleweight championship. And he used every moment he got before his battle with Anderson Silva to fire verbal jabs at the Spider, as well as his friends and allies. But Sonnen made good on all of his pre-fight claims by dominating the first 4 rounds of their battle at UFC 117, and it looked like he would be the one to stop Silva's dominance halfway through the 5th round. That is, of course, until he made a brief error in judgment that allowed the champion to lock up a triangle choke and force Sonnen to submit. 17 months after their initial encounter, Sonnen picked up the microphone after narrowly defeating Michael Bisping on Fox and continued to verbally attack Silva. He wanted a rematch. But the result was the same once more, and the gangster decided that the ring just wasn't for him. And while we're on the topic of nail-biting matches, the match between the next two fighters gave even Sonnen a run for his money. When Frankie Edgar and Gray Maynard stepped into the ring at UFC 125, everyone expected a boring match. This is because both of these fighters were famous for never getting decisive wins. But nobody could have predicted what happened on New Year's Day in 2011. Because together, these two put on one of the most action-packed back-and-forth battles to ever take place inside the octagon. After a thrilling 25 minutes, the fight was declared a draw, which paved the way for a rematch. The third fight between the two top lightweight contenders took center stage at UFC 136 in Houston, Texas. It was just as exciting as their first fight, with Maynard again gaining control and almost ending Edgar in the opening round. However, the champion came back to settle the score by hitting Maynard with a short right hand and finishing him with a barrage of lefts.
Maynard's in trouble! His hands all over! Frankie Edgar!
And fans named it the best title fight ever. Well, there you have it. These were the biggest rivalries in the UFC of all time. See you all in the next video.